All right, welcome everyone. We'll give it a minute for people to start joining. Thank you so much for joining us on a Friday. I know that this timing isn't necessarily ideal, but again, thank you for those of you who are joining us. And I hope that you've been able to join us on our last two sessions as well and can join us next week for our final session. As you are joining today, we're talking about social media and communications. So in the chat, if you could, we would love to hear some social media sites, accounts, groups, individuals that you really like their content for whatever reason, whether it's you really like the images that they post or the information or the campaigns that they do. Go ahead and just share some of your favorite accounts in the chat. We'd like to see what you guys are seeing on the internet. And then we'll go ahead and get started in just a minute.
There's a lot of good social media profiles out there.
I know one of my favorite social media sites is Future Earth. I don't know if anybody follows them on Instagram, but I love Future Earth. Their graphics, their information, their campaigns, and the stuff that they share is just awesome. Origami Library. Interesting. I haven't heard of that before.
I haven't either. I'm gonna look that one up.
And then Kate too, also Atmos. I know you have that as an example in a little minute later in the slides. They're also awesome. But yeah, Origami Library.
Ooh, we got a lot. Liberty Wildlife, Southwest Wildlife, and Desert Museum's Facebook pages are beautiful.
Oh, the Desert Museum is so cool. I've had that on my bucket list for a while. I've always wanted to go, and I've looked at their Facebook page before. It's definitely really interesting, really informative. They do a great job for sure. So we'll get started here. As you guys are thinking, definitely feel free to continue to share in the chat. Yes, BBC Earth. Poetry on TikTok, that's awesome. Definitely keep sending those throughout, because I definitely want to make sure that I can personally go and check them all out, because I am always looking for people in groups who are posting in interesting ways and using different tactics, techniques on their social media, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So again, just a rundown of what we're going to be doing today, talking about all of these kind of concepts and the more technical side of social media, going from our two first panels that were a little bit more informative and less discussion based to today, where we will hopefully be able to interact with you guys a little bit more and chat about some of the technical stuff, like I said. So today I'm going to pass it over to Kate, my wonderful colleague who I've had the honor of working with for almost 2 years, which is pretty crazy, and just rock star all around.
Oh, flattered. Thank you so much, Laura. Hi everyone, it's so good to be here. I'm going to talk to you guys about social media. Just a little bit of background here. I've worked for the Ocean Project, and I'm pretty much the spearhead person behind the social media of World Ocean Day. And that is my part-time job. My full-time job is working for Only One, which is also an action platform specifically for our ocean and ocean issues. And I also spearhead the social media and larger community engagement there as well. Before these, I worked at the Museum of Natural History in New York City, and I popped around. Some of my favorite jobs there were in exhibitions, so also getting creative with ways to explain concepts and ideas and issues to people. And then I've still been in the ocean space for a long time, and I worked at the Ocean Agency, and there we did Google Underwater Street View, and then released a Netflix documentary called Chasing Coral. So I've been in this space for more than 10 years. I love the ocean, but more importantly, I love digital advocacy and getting people excited who maybe wouldn't get excited otherwise. So I'm really stoked to talk to you guys about, I think, my best ways that I've worked with social media and digital advocacy, and hopefully you guys can pull some tips and tricks from it as well. Perfect. So I'm going to hit on two types here. One is non-campaign posts, and sometimes I like to call them fluff posts, not meaning they're not important, but they don't have that call to action of saying, do this for the ocean, but they do make a social media profile fun. And then I'm also going to hit on campaign and advocacy posts. So people who are looking to have a larger campaign, one specific call to action meaning the item that you want someone to do. So it's like sign a petition or donate, etc., or even host an event, right? And come to my event. That's a big one. So I'm going to start off with the more general fluff posts, what I call them. Again, they are really your bread and butter here for social media, because that's why people will come and follow you. They're not going to come follow you when you preach or when you ask for someone to do something all the time. They're going to come want to see pretty images, interesting content itself. So this is a screenshot of World Ocean Day, and just a couple posts that I posted one after another, and I wanted to really highlight the diversity here, and the experimentation. So here you're going to see I have a ton of different content items. Sometimes in the top middle, I have a reel of a dolphin. People love megafauna and reels right now, so that's hot. I celebrate holidays, no matter what religion, ethnicity, etc. So that was a Christmas themed one on the ocean. People do seem to love it. It's well known. It's familiar to people. We also do a weekly happy headlines feature. That's one of our more popular posts. And I gather around the internet some really good news, hopefully in the climate space, usually in the ocean space, just for people to share. We see our shares go way high with the happy headlines. And then again, I have really interesting photographs. I feature different organizations because I like to make those connections and build that community. Memes, I'm gonna give it to Laura here. She came up with the idea. She's like, let's gather a whole bunch of really funny climate memes. People love it. So we're showing that we're still with the times here. You know, I do some text posts. You can see the thank you below to show that we're actually doing work in the background as well. We're not just posting really beautiful art. So there's a lot of diversity, and I found great success in doing that as well. Now I'm gonna show you a few really beautiful examples I pulled from the internet, and I did mention Atmos in the chat before, but this one really stuck out at me, and it says 5 places to reconsider visiting in 2023. So for me, the number one point here is that it's a list. And back from when BuzzFeed started, people love lists. It's simple, it's easy to understand, it's just intuitive, right? So you know what you're gonna get when you slide through it. And then I also really love about this post is that it's a list I've never heard of before, and I didn't even consider. So a lot of people are traveling again, so it's pretty timely. And then you're like, wait, I should reconsider going to, it's like Antarctica or something. Like, I think that's one of them. So it just makes you think a little differently, and it's not necessarily asking you to follow a page or donate, but it does make me want to go share it with my friends and my audience as well. Future Earth is another great account if you don't follow it. You guys might know, based in the US, there's this big uproar about gas stoves and what they mean for the climate. And no matter which way you fall, I think it's really important to make sure you get content out as timely as possible. So these people posted it the week of the discussions, debates. This was like a trending hashtag on Twitter. And then here you can see they also did Future Earth times heated. So it was a collaborative post. Also, it helps people hit 2 different audiences at once. So it's beautiful, it's branded, it's interesting, and it's timely all at once. And again, it's not asking you to do anything. It's just asking you to learn more, like, you know, honestly, just engage with the content itself. So really important, just if you're doing these fluff posts in between your more advocacy oriented posts as well, which I will hit on now. So again, I'm taking a screenshot here from World Ocean Day. I circled the post here for a campaign that I kind of spearhead and ran for the Giving Tuesday, Giving month, really. I didn't want to do Tuesday itself because it's a pretty oversaturated holiday and all nonprofits ask for money, attention on that day. So instead, I decided to make it a giving month. So we had more opportunity, more time to really hit on more audiences. So you can see here, I did not post every single time about it. I did keep my fluff posts, artwork, cool photos going on in between. Happy headlines does not stop no matter what every Friday. So you can also see here, I've kept it branded to World Ocean Day. I've kept our colors. It's fairly easy to understand what it is. So you can fund a social media graphic for $5. And then someone can also understand it when there's a $75 ask. So in this case, it was a fundraiser, which is this type of campaign, actually, obviously, but it's slightly more branded and it's not like punching you in the face so obvious, but enough where you sprinkle it into your feeds and share it, etc. So I was really proud of this one. I think it worked really well. And it's a great example of how I think campaigns can work. Here's an example of an advocacy campaign that also really blew up over the internet, and it was hashtag protect the Arctic. I had some friends behind this, and they're digital impact people. And pretty much they worked with influencers on TikTok and said, hey, can you just post a quick 15-second video on how much you want to protect the Arctic? And here's some footage. And it really just took over the internet. I think they got millions and millions of signatures to protect protected territory up north from the Arctic, and they actually succeeded. So they could follow up with their followers and their email list and say, we did it thanks to you. It wasn't just us. You actually engaged that community, and you saw the benefits of it in the end. So TikTok's a powerful tool. If you guys have time, although it takes a lot of time to do as well. So there's definitely benefits there. I do encourage you to check out Protect the Arctic. It did end, I think, a few months ago, but it's just a great example of how something can work so well. Awesome. I do want to leave a ton of time for Q&As because I think that's going to be really powerful. But I encourage you to screenshot this slide. It's basically the resources I've found to be the most useful in my many years of social advocacy. I know finding imagery and content itself can be really hard, especially if you don't have a large budget to work with stock footage. So I listed a whole bunch of free options there. There is always the option of going and asking photographers on Instagram, let's say, and direct messaging them and saying, hey, we're this zoo, aquarium, nonprofit, and we're looking to use an image. Is this okay? Obviously, you offer them credit, and most of the time they'll come back and they're like, this is a great opportunity. Please feel free to use it. Laura said she'd upload a document, so that would be helpful. Flickr, great resource as well. Make sure you credit photographers as needed. You just don't want to get in trouble there. Design and copy, Canva. I know it's been a thing for a while now. You guys, that tool is really invaluable, especially if you don't want to pay for Photoshop and you don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of Adobe. Use Canva. It's free for nonprofits. It's worth it. I've used it for years and I still love it. Hemingway app I did put on here because not a lot of people know about it, but you can put in text and yes, the slide made on Canva. Hemingway, you can put in your text, let's say a mock-up caption, and it will give you the grade level that you're rating at. And so sometimes I'll put in a pretty complex, let's say, caption on deep sea mining, and it's going to spit out to me, this is grade level 12. Now, I genuinely try to stick to grade level 6 to 8. That's the audience that most of our audiences can relate to, understand, etc. And you don't want to assume people know more than that, just for sake of ease. And then you also don't want to explain to them like grade 2 because then they're insulted. So that's a great tool. It's free. Just plug in your text, use it. And then I did put in a whole bunch of automated planning. I am a big advocate of not posting on the weekends if you don't work on the weekends. So use it and make sure you just automatically publish your content as is, because consistency is also going to be key in getting your word out and getting your post exposed to audiences all around. And also we do have a social media toolkit from World Ocean Day. There's lots of tips, tricks there as well. And we also do provide a whole bunch of free imagery. You're welcome to use our logo, etc. Now, before we get into more of a discussion based, I did want to kind of highlight a few rules that I like to live by for all three of, well, both non-advocacy posts and advocacy posts. For the fluff posts, I do want to point out that I experiment all the time. And this is something that I appreciate when managers who are overseeing social media coordinators or creators, they let their employees really experiment, because if you don't fail, you haven't learned anything, and that means you're not doing anything right. So you want to have these failings, and if a post flops, don't be upset about it. Just go with it, learn from it. The algorithm changes constantly, so it's hard to beat yourself up on that. I also want to encourage you guys to mix up your call to actions. This is being like, every post, don't say, go like and share this post, because people will get really tired of it. Instead, say, visit our link in bio and learn more about it here, or go follow this partner account. It builds your community and also doesn't make you redundant. And lastly, at least with the fluff posts, you guys should find a voice or a personality. It's really fun. People come to your profile and they'll know what to expect. And I think a good example of that is the Monterey Bay Aquarium. They really took humor to the next level, and I love it because they do experiment, and it's hilarious. But also I learned a ton about deep sea shrimp, things I never thought I would know about, but I also laugh about it. And I always know I can go to their profile for a good joke and some education. So they have a consistent voice that I really admire. Now, I want to just hit on a few rules that I follow with advocacy posts and campaigns, and I can kind of get into the step-by-step of how I think about a campaign beforehand. But one big trick is to prepare way ahead. Give yourself like double the amount of time you think it's going to take you, because time goes by really fast, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, my campaign needs to launch next week. So really have that nice lead out time. Consistency is key. Keep posts consistent. So maybe like twice a week, bring up your campaign. Don't overdo it, but make sure it is being posted at a regular cadence. And then here is when I encourage you to use a single call to action. This is when you're just going to kind of pound in what you want that person to do. Sign my petition here. Every post that has to do with your campaign, lead them back to the petition, either through a link on your stories, a link on Twitter. Just a side note, it's helpful to track links with UTMs. You can look that up, but it's a great way to know where people are clicking from what source. So keep it just as one. That's the one time you don't want to experiment, and you don't want to mix them up, because you really want to make that campaign a success. And then keep it branded when you can. Again, I think my example from World Ocean Day, you can really, it's coming from World Ocean Day, you know what I'm asking without having to go back to the first post, because it's so branded. So that's my other rule I live by with advocacy posts. And then just more generally for all posts, I do always a final check to make sure I've credited photographers or videographers. There's nothing worse than getting a bad reputation because you don't credit anyone. There's lots of examples out there of people just like getting canceled because of that. So make sure that's your last to do checklist. And then be creative with mediums. I do want to point out that you shouldn't post the same post on your Twitter as you do on your LinkedIn. Different audiences, and we can dive more into that, but just really make sure and be aware of where you're posting it and who you're trying to reach. And lastly, with all posts, work with other people. Instagram came out with that collaborate feature. Use it. Make friends with different organizations, suggest copy. That is such an underutilized tool, and I think for me and experience, it's just help us blow up, because we can hit on their audience and kind of poach their audience, and they can take ours as well, all for the good of the climate, right? So make sure you take advantage of that. So I know I just threw a ton of information at you guys, and I really do want to make sure your questions get answered, and me and Laura can have a bigger discussion on social media. but I do think just it's a huge tool that everyone should have a good grasp at, especially working in organizations, especially if you're looking to promote events, etc. Which is why I'm so glad you're here, and it's incredibly important.
Every single time, Kate, you do a presentation on social media, I feel like I learn something new, or I'm reminded of a technique or principle or rule or whatever. Again, definitely feel free to throw your questions in the chat, in the Q&A. I have my own questions that I want to ask Kate, that we can dig into a couple of things a little bit deeper, but I also definitely want to make sure that you guys are given the opportunity to bring your own experiences to the table too. We want to hear from you if you have anything that has worked really well for you in the past, or if you have a specific question about things, definitely feel free to throw them in the chat or the Q&A. Now, the first question, Kate, that I do have for you specifically about all of this, of course, everybody who is attending today was asked to fill out a pre-program survey. And one of the questions on that survey was asking about each of your individual confidence in your ability to use your existing social media skills to convey advocacy messaging via social media. But I want to kind of dig into what that messaging itself actually means. And I think you already touched on a lot, but I would love to chat about like, how to identify your audience and how do different groups and demographics of people engage differently? Because for me, I know like mostly my parents' age or older are using Facebook more days now. And like Gen Z definitely tends to use TikTok more. And like LinkedIn is just sort of like a mixed bag. So can you speak to any of that at all?
Totally. And that's something that you should think about like early on in your stages of making a campaign, is who are you trying to target, right? What are you looking for Gen Zers? Because that's going to be a different campaign than when you're looking for boomers to help donate. You're not going to be asking Gen Z to donate, $500, etc. So that's an incredibly important thing to think about. How I think about it is Twitter is a very political sphere. So if you're going to be asking high ups, if you're going to be advocating and asking your local congressperson, use Twitter. People like just spam government Twitters, and it's been shown to work. It's current events, it's fast paced. So a lot of these fluff posts definitely won't do as well on Twitter, just something to note. But again, I do want to flag it with a lot of changes going on in this tech world, especially Twitter. Just be aware of the changes. I don't have advice other than just to flag that. Facebook is growing towards an older crowd. There is a bit of not a rumor, but a misconception that it's going downhill and losing tons of people who use it and users. It is going a little bit down, but there's still so many users. I think it's like 1 in 4 people who have the internet go on Facebook. So don't forget about it. I would always post whatever you're posting on any other one on Facebook to see how well it does. It's not going to hurt you to post more there, but it generally is swaying towards less Gen Z and older crowds. And then of course, if you have the capacity, use TikTok. That's where tons of people not only go on every day, but they spend a lot of their day on it. So they will keep swiping, and if they find a profile, they'll go and keep swiping on all of your posts. Whereas let's say on Instagram, they'll see a post, but then they won't swipe down for months to see your content. So TikTok's really big with the younger generations. LinkedIn, I definitely encourage you to post it if you have events going on. People go there to find jobs, events, and networking opportunities. So that's going to be a big advocacy poll as well, and something that I think people often overlook, but it's a really powerful tool, especially for people who are in college, leaving college, or kind of in the higher education space of their life. So make sure that's part of your goal setting, and your over preliminary plan is who do we want to connect with, and then make sure that's shown in your plan on your assets and platforms that you'll post on.
Yeah, that's super, super helpful. And I think kind of identifying your audience and like who you're going after will determine which platform you're posting on, and also the type of content that you're posting on each. Like you mentioned, don't post the same thing. Sometimes it is okay, like in the example of Facebook. But to answer Sarah's question in the Q&A, do you have any recommendations for time management techniques for managing social media? I think a lot of that actually falls kind of into the answer to that question, because when you can more easily identify your audience and really strategize your content into a calendar and use some of those platforms like Hootsuite or Buffer or whatever, that kind of helps as well. But I think possibly, Sarah, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. Are you meaning time management for like stopping yourself scrolling, or are you talking more about the organizational side of things? I would like to know. But Kate, do you have any tips or tricks for that?
Totally. And I'll answer this based on how organizational. Yep. Okay. So as someone, I'm going to use only one as my example, because that's another job, is we have a huge following on Instagram. And one, will prioritize Instagram because that's just where most of our engagement is coming in. But two, I as an employee want to grow our Twitter. So I will spend kind of not an equal amount of time, but a significant amount of time on Twitter of where we're trying to grow. And then let's say as an organization, if you have the capacity or the ability to hire on interns, they're great to bring on into your, let's say, Instagram, and then respond to all of the comments, because that's going to be a huge factor for Instagram to kind of prioritize your post and all the feeds, is if you're responding to people and be engaging with everyone in your audience, no matter how small their following is. So I've asked interns to come in and just show people that we're listening. We're there is a human behind there. And I know I'm digressing from your original question of time management there, but I think of it kind of as a pie chart, where I'll spend, I don't know, like say a quarter to a third of my day on social media, posting, content creation, and engagement. And then the other part of it is usually planning for future campaigns. Obviously, I need to make sure I'm not spending my entire 8 hours on social media, or I will just melt into something sad. So it's all about boundaries there. And also, when you're like on the weekend, take the weekend off. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to kill your organization. Have something scheduled. Use the schedule tool as much as you can. With that being said, check in once in a while. For World Ocean Day, I'll check in twice a day, maybe for 5 minutes each, to make sure there's no fires, and then post on my story. And then, just make sure you're there. So there isn't really a trick to it other than setting boundaries for yourself and realizing that the world will continue turning even if you're not on social media.
I really like that too. I think that there's another question in the Q&A, so I'll wrap up quick, but I think there are also ways that you can kind of strategize and chunk out your time. Like, for example, if you are running a campaign that uses a very specific hashtag, you can be like, okay, for 30 minutes, I'm going to sit and I'm going to scroll through and I'm going to like every single post under this one hashtag. And then once that 30 minutes is up, okay, you move on to the next task. Yep. And you can kind of chunk it up like that too, where it's more specific about what you're doing with that time versus like kind of broad and overarching. But let's see what's in the Q&A. We got 2 here. What are some marketing tips? How do you get people to remember your message in the overload of content? That's a great question, and kind of goes back to what you're saying with Giving Tuesday, kind of just like sprinkling.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a great answer to this, I would be a billionaire. Because the whole trick of marketing is like, how do I get past all of the noise? And my best advice here is to go look up interesting advertisement campaigns, interesting marketing campaigns, and then literally drag and drop those campaigns into your inspiration folder. I always flag or save on Instagram posts that make me stop and swipe and just like just make me think, because if I've stopped, they've done something right, because it's easy to do the doom scroll and just not really care. So the trick is to stop and do something really splashy. Remember, people's attention spans are really short. So make sure whatever it is, within the first 2 seconds, you got someone. And I have a really good example. One of my favorite marketing campaigns ever was for a highlighter company. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but what they did is a campaign of old historic photos, and then went and took a highlighter and someone in the background, usually a woman, and said, like, this is the person who actually takes credit, who should take credit. Like, let's rewrite history. And they used their highlighter, right? So it wasn't like obviously like, hey, buy this highlighter, etc. But it, like, I'm looking at a historic photo of, the inventors of a chair, right? And it's really the woman in the background who deserves the attention, but it's the highlighter that they're trying to sell. So look up highlighter ad campaign and your mind will be blown. But the trick there is just to make sure it's splashy and not too text heavy. People don't like to read text. And if you do text, do it on a second slide, and then use graphics and color. Again, that's the world we live in. People, their brains want that. So experiment. And again, if you have that answer to that question, let me know and we can partner and start our own business.
I think that's great. And I think that actually does kind of lead into our next question from Emma about marketing, and trial and error is a huge part of social media too. So my 2 cents on that is to ask people what they think of it before you post. Get as many eyeballs on your campaign as you can before it actually goes live to the public. Probably better to have those eyeballs be somebody who actually is active on social media and not like your grandparents, because they're just going to tell you that they love it anyway. But, being able to take constructive criticism and think about things from a different person's perspective is also super, super helpful. So in the Q&A, Emma's question is, if you do experiment and it's unpopular, let's say the campaign doesn't necessarily go very well, what is the next step? Do you stick with your popular style for a while, or do you keep experimenting?
Oh, I love this. My brain immediately goes to something that was just posted, and pardon my language, it's part of the title, but it's from Shit You Should Care About. And
Yes.
you know what I'm talking about? They just posted something about cold pizza. I don't remember what it was. It was a poll. And they have 3.2 million followers, but only 5,000 people liked it, which to them is really small. So what they did is the day after, they posted a picture of Taylor Swift in an Olaf costume and said, hey guys, I noticed literally no one saw that post yesterday. So I'm wondering if it's the algorithm or if people really just don't care about cold pizza. And that post blew up, showing that, you know what, people just don't care about cold pizza. But in doing so, the post with Taylor Swift blew up and gave them the attention that they were looking for. All to say that take the experiment and run with it. So if you want to keep experimenting and slimming things down, just change one part of that post. So if you did a reel and it was on, the science behind whale flukes, right? Take out the science and just do a video of whale flukes. How does that do? You can learn from that. If it does better, then people were overloaded with science, and you work with that and tweak with that. Right now, for example, reels are doing really well. 2 weeks ago, they were doing terribly. So I'll just skim down the cadence of my reels. And then once I see that a reel does well again, I'll start posting again at a higher cadence. So it's all about tweaking and kind of making it a puzzle of like, okay, why did this not work the way I thought it would work? And then going from there. So sometimes it's the topic, sometimes it's the medium, sometimes it's just not the right time. A lot of these scheduling tools will calculate the time that most of your users are on. So use that, because I posted something last night at like 7:30 p.m. Eastern and it did really poorly. And you know why? Because I posted late. That's all there was to it. It's a great post, just didn't do well because it was late. So think of it as like a really fun detective puzzle to figure it out, and then just post more to get down to that one specific thing that works well.
Yeah. And I think it's also interesting to note that the trial and error and the tweaking that you're talking about, it can either be tweaking the content itself or tweaking, like you're saying, like what time you're posting, like all of that side of things when it has to do more with the algorithm. So
yes,
don't necessarily immediately, like, if something doesn't go as well as you were hoping, you don't immediately have to be like, oh, it's obviously like this problem. That's why it's called trial and error. You just have to keep shifting around and figuring stuff out that way.
totally.
And I think with that being said as well, going kind of back to the marketing tips in the previous question, there's a couple of different ways on different platforms that you can kind of boost engagement here and there. And one thing that I personally really like to use is the like Instagram story buttons, the polls, the quizzes, because, and then if you like stories too, if you get a lot of people liking stories, that tells the algorithm to actually show it to more people. So if you have a lot of engagement on that kind of thing, like you can do a quiz like, did you know blah blah blah, yes or no? Like that's a super easy way to get a little bit of extra engagement that can kind of snowball effect eventually. So I just wanted to touch on that.
No, and just to carry on with that is your audience they're real people. So what I'll do is I'll post a poll on our stories and say, what do you want to see more of? Because people will answer. And what do you want to see less of? And if you ask an open-ended question, you're saying, what can we do better? Like, how can we make it so you want to share this profile with your friends? And people will be honest. They'll be like, get rid of this sucked. And you're like, I love that, because that is user data and user research through social media. So that's a whole other tool that you can dive deep in.
Yeah, and the user data is also an interesting point, because we can talk about like on Instagram reels versus images and how much better reels are doing now because the algorithm is prioritizing them over regular images. But then also on Twitter, like images versus just text or retweets or stuff like that. Like there's so many different moving parts. And it's a little tricky to keep up with, but I know you've mentioned this to me before. That's how I found out about this, that the Instagram CEO does like explainer videos on their personal profile of like how the algorithm works.
Yes. So maybe Laura, you can pull this up and put it in the chat, but the CEO, not the founder of Instagram, will post a reel usually once a week, and he'll tell you what the algorithm will be prioritizing or a new feature, or tips and tricks. So if you are doing social media and you want to get better at campaigning, etc., this is kind of your must-have resource that not a lot of people know about. So all of a sudden, it starts with an M, but I'm sure Laura, you'll find it. It's there we go. He just goes into, hey guys, just so you know, we're gonna be experimenting with longer reels, like let us know, so you can also be the first person to try out a new feature, and then the people are going to share it more anyway. Because I know when the remind me button came out, that no one knew about it for a few weeks, and then everyone did. So if you're one of the first, people are like, oh, that's so cool. They're clearly with it and they know how to promote their own content.
Yeah. And I know I do want to just preface this conversation. We're already kind of dug into it a little bit here, but I also want to make sure that you guys aren't getting totally and completely overwhelmed with these concepts, because social media can be, like we already kind of talked about, like a total time suck, and you can really just melt into it without actually being aware of how much time you're spending on it, the impact that it's having on your mental health. And so when we talk about doing advocacy on social media, I think there is a little bit of an expectation, especially now with TikTok, how easily things can go viral, is that if it doesn't have like an insane amount of engagement, then I should not count that post or whatever as a successful post. And that's not necessarily true, because going back to what we were talking about before, identifying your audience, if it reaches more people in your community than it reaches outside of your community, that is totally fine. Like it doesn't necessarily have to blow up or go viral in order to still have an impact. I think that's really important to remember.
And some posts are going to reach your non-followers, and that'll be amazing for your campaign posts. And then other posts are going to stay within your followers, but that's great because you want to talk to your followers. So figure out what you're trying to prioritize, and then again, trial and error, tweak according to what you know. Something I did learn recently from an insider who does work at Instagram said, hashtags are becoming way more important recently. So if you do hashtag event, yep, as in that was given to me a week and a half ago. So if you add like hashtag event, hashtag advocacy, hashtag ocean conservation, or even hashtag zoo, hashtag aquarium, this will boost your presence in the explore tab, and more people are hitting that as well. So maybe insider tip.
Yeah. One thing I've seen a lot of people do, which I think is so easy to do, if you just like go in the notes folder on your phone and you just write out like hashtag blah blah blah, and you just do like 20 hashtags, you can copy and paste that whole thing and then just post it in the comments of your post.
Totally.
And that's something that a ton of people do. Whether it works or not, I'm not sure. I've never done that myself, but it seems to be something that a lot of people are doing more and more. But that's really good information to know.
Yeah.
And on that note, this next question in the Q&A, how do you get a campaign started if you don't have much of a social media presence? And I think that really goes back to what we were talking about, like connecting with other organizations and remembering that there are people on the other side of the screen, and there are ways to engage with them on social media that are different from engaging them in real life.
Absolutely. And I know this this question is focused, I mean, this whole presentation is about social media, but I do want to remind you that there's email lists, and email lists are very powerful. So, and I understand in this question, maybe you don't have an email list as well, no problem, but I do want to flag it that there's listservs, there's different Google groups, Facebook groups that you should go and help and push and promote something there as well. It's not just solely on, it's easy to kind of get tunnel vision into social media, but as far as like, you know, not a huge presence, that's totally fine. I would encourage you to reach out to possible partners who maybe have a larger following, and you can offer them, hey, I can help make you content if you just accept my collaborative post request. And right there, you're gonna get their reach, which could be huge, considering. Try out, reach out to definitely not necessarily organizations, but accounts. So as the ocean space person, I do know like at Discover Ocean or at Sea, they're just like these big fan group clubs. Even, you know, Octo Nation, which is like the world's largest octopus fan club, reach out to them. They're nice people. And they're usually happy and willing to help out with a good cause, a good campaign, a cool event. People are more willing to share on stories, which is fine because that still reaches a ton of their audiences. Just ask them to post a link on the story as well, so it doesn't just get lost. Experiment, just keep cold DMing. Eventually people will respond to you because you're really passionate, and they'll see that. But collaborating partnerships are interesting. And then just keep working up and building and practicing your posts, and build a solid feed. So when people do hit your profile, they know, oh, they've only posted 9 times. Like I'm not going to follow this. No, have a backlog. Show people that you're legitimate and you're, you know, you deserve to have their follow. But really, again, my best advice to you is just partner up with people and offer them something in exchange for promotion.
Yeah, those are all really good points. And I kind of want to call back to a quote from one of our panel speakers from last session, Callum Watson, a very dear friend of mine. I remember, I want this on a t-shirt. Closed mouths do not get fed, just ask. It's something he shared last week. And it's really stuck with me because I think it's so true. There is such a big notion that there's like correct social media etiquette, like, oh, it's weird if I like send this person like a cold DM or whatever. But honestly, there are things that you can do that like are so simple that you don't even think of it, but it still makes a connection. Like you can, if you have with your campaign or even your personal account, if you're trying to, you know, spread a message, when you share something to your Instagram story, just tag the person who posted it. You don't even have to have that text be visible and they'll still get the tag. Like you can do the thing where you put it underneath the post and it's still there, and that'll show them that you have shared it, and then they can like it when you're in the DMs or whatever. And that's a super easy way to just say, hey, thanks for whatever, you know. And then if you have something when you have a post, you can go to view current story reshares as well. And it'll show you all of the people's public stories that that particular post is shown in currently. You can go through and you can just like all of those stories too. And then that'll sometimes show people that you're extra engaged. Little ways to do that. And then one of my favorite things to do is if you are doing a lot of cold DMs and there's like a response like, thank you so much for sharing, that you have to type out like 80 times in a row, just use like a text shortcut. So if you hit T, it automatically autofills with the rest of the message, and that saves a ton of time too.
Those are called saved replies. So if you type out something long, I think there's a little button on the side that says save it as a saved reply. So let's say someone asks if they can volunteer. We don't have volunteer positions. I type in V and it says, sorry, we don't have a volunteer position yet, but check out these people. And it saves me tons of time. Also, hot tip, Laura, just so you know, if you want a hidden tag, you don't have to hide it behind anything. You can just tag them and swipe all the way to the top. It disappears, but it's still tagged. It's called a hidden tag. And you can tag a lot of people that way and not like try to strategically hide their tags. They're still going to get notified.
Interesting. That is a hot tip. I think honestly, this is every time, like I said, we have this conversation, I'm always thinking about this in new ways. And I do kind of want to go back to zoos, aquariums, and museums and talking about these institutions that all of our attendees today are kind of in association with in one way or another. And there are, like I said, we talked about Monterey Bay, they use humor a lot. And I think it's so interesting to see that, because you see more and more these bigger institutions who tend to have pretty strict rules and guidelines about their content and how they stay engaged. You're starting to see them more and more kind of open up. And I would like to hear from you, Kate, how you think that young people who are, you know, similar to our attendees today can kind of help them break apart even more, and how they can engage with them in that way.
Yeah, like how the attendees can engage with their audiences in a more fun way. Totally. And I think this is going to really hit on like being creative. And I know that sounds like a stupid answer, but one of my other favorite examples is the Georgia Aquarium. And they're not necessarily funny, but they have a lot of behind the scenes content, right? And they grew their following that way because everyone wants to see the whale shark getting fed. And everyone wants to see the sharks, you know, getting their medical checkups. And it's things that a visitor doesn't actually have access to. They only have access to it through the social. So that's another really creative way to just grow followers and grow an audience, because even if I don't even live near like Georgia or Atlanta, I'm going to follow them because I want to see that. And I think zoos have that same potential of showing behind the scenes, the feeding, even like the mating. You know, people, it's classic, perfect for the internet. People love sharing funny things like that, where, you know, zookeepers get just insane experiences that, if shared with the world, would really just boost your reach, boost your audiences, show your credibility, and just show that you are in this space and you are, you know, deserve to be followed. So it's really those creative ways. Museums walk people through the exhibit that just opened, because you're not going to spend time at each part of the exhibit, but people will be like, oh my gosh, I want to sit inside of a whale heart. Like, that's so cool. And it's going to be more than just social media. That's actually going to bring people to the museum itself. So it's giving them a little teaser. It's not just posting a regular bland photo saying new exhibit. Yeah, that's great, but show me a part that I want to go visit in person and touch and spend money on that ticket. So, I mean, I have a million of these ideas. Feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to kind of brainstorm with someone and give them ideas, especially as someone who's had experience in the museum world. When sometimes these topics aren't necessarily splashy or fun, quote unquote. I mean, they're fun to me and to my colleagues, but the general public's like, okay, cool, how fun can this be? No, we can make it fun. There's always a way. It's just about experimenting. And I know I sound like a broken record here. It's all about experimenting. And also for managers, let the people experiment. Let your workers try it. Yeah. I really encourage you to say yes more than no. Obviously, if you have a legal team, flag it by them. I don't want to get in trouble for any of that, but just be creative and consider what people, no matter where in the world, can get from your account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, honestly, because our attendees of this session are youth associated with zoos, aquariums, and museums, I love, like, for the World Ocean Day Youth Advisory Council, we are about to start doing social media takeovers for all of our council members very soon. And I think that, you know, if you're at an aquarium, let's say like the Aquarium of the Pacific, I'm using that as an example because I personally used to work there and I know that they have this program. They have teen science cafes, and how cool would it be for their social media team to come in and cover a teen science cafe, because that will still, you know, they're able to do the thing that they're always doing, but it will show so many more people that what they're doing might also be possible in their own institution. So if you're a young person affiliated with one of these kind of larger institutions and you have an idea like that, I would honestly really encourage you to go to your, you know, volunteer coordinator, your internship manager, or whoever it is who is your like supervisor in the program, and just ask them straight up, just be like, hey, what would it take for me to do a social media takeover about this particular project or event that your, you know, teen volunteers are doing, or something like that. Because, you know, they might say yes or no. That's okay. That's when we go back and we use the skills that we learned in session 2. You know, you got to keep trying, and it's the trial and error. But I think, as we've been talking about, these kinds of social media teams are starting to be a little bit more open to stuff like that. So if that idea comes to the, like, is a possibility, I would definitely suggest going after it for sure.
I even thought about like going up to whoever your contact is at the zoo or aquarium and be like, can I interview the zookeeper for, you know, the manta rays? And right there itself, you don't need much. You need that person, you know, 15 minutes of that person's time. You can do an Instagram live. You can do a TikTok after the fact if you edit it. Most likely these people will be like, yeah, unless they're swamped. But it's free content for them, and it also helps you boost. And at the end, you can always have your call to action, like, you know, subscribe, sign this petition, etc. Just more ideas. There's limitless.
Yeah. So this has been great so far, and I do want to encourage you guys, if you have any questions, keep sending them in the chat, keep sending them in the Q&A. I have one more particular kind of thing that I would like to talk about, going back to the ratio of fluff, quote, fluff versus real posts. Because the fluff is supposed to be what is interspersed between your donation requests and your campaigns and your calls to action and stuff. But those, you're not just posting fluff for the sake of posting fluff, right? There is a purpose behind those posts. So, Kate, if you want to kind of go through what are some of the things that you can actually do with those fluff posts that can help with your engagement, I think that'd be really helpful too.
Yeah, of course. Laura, will you go back to one of the first slides where it shows the World Ocean Day social media posts? And I can kind of explain my thought process. Yeah, that works. Perfect. So thought process here, you guys, is let's take the art piece on the left top left. I posted that, first of all, because it's beautiful ocean art, and that's amazing as is. But I've also messaged and started a connection and relationship with the artists, right? Because these artists have their own skill sets and audiences who clearly like what they do. So right there is building a relationship. And if you don't even build a relationship, if you post it, obviously with credit, they'll see you and they'll follow you. So, you know, you can try experimenting there. The same goes with the photo of the corals in the middle, right? The amazing photographer who has a large following. I posted their work, and then they'll reshare it on their story. So right there, it's free collaboration. It's a win-win for both of us. The bottom middle, that's really interesting, I do something called Orgs We Love. So I feature organizations that probably don't get the attention they deserve. And again, I request collaborate post with them, and they are like, oh my gosh, yes, World Ocean Day wants to share our work. Of course, that's amazing. And we get to share their work. Memes, my insight behind there is I want to kind of target a younger audience. Let's target the people who are here who want to laugh, rather than just learn about cool organizations. It's going to be an experiment. And again, there is a reasoning behind all of these quote unquote fluff posts. The bottom left is a thank you to our signers and supporters for people who signed a petition. So we're not asking anyone to sign a petition. We're saying we see you, we recognize you. Thank you so much for your work. And people feel good about that. They want to see the recognition. And again, I mentioned celebrations, and this doesn't have to be religious. It can even be like International Day of the Jellyfish. People love it. It's a community builder because lots of people will be posting about it. Lots of people will share it because, oh, I forgot about World Jellyfish Day. I'm going to post this on my story. So there's always reasons behind it. And I think you shouldn't just post a photo because you needed to post something that day. Like, have it be intentional. Make there be a subliminal reason of why you did this and see if it works. And again, bring it back to the experimenting. If it worked, great. So like Orgs We Love, and it doesn't get the most likes in the world, but it does show that we care about other people who work in our space and how we appreciate them. So right there, we've made tons of cool relationships with interesting people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you touched on that point last. I had helped Kate a bunch at the beginning when we started doing Orgs We Love. And I just know that when we are able to do collaborative posts with some of these smaller groups, they're so grateful and they're so appreciative. And it is just such a wonderful feeling of collaboration. And again, going back to the like, is it weird if I do this and I don't know them? Honestly, like 98% of the time, they're just going to be like, this is awesome. Like, thank you so much for posting. I got a little bit more engagement and you guys got a little bit more engagement. It's very much a win-win. So yeah, thank you, Kate, for going back over those points, because I'm personally a big fan of the fluff posts where you can still see the voice of that group. Kind of, you talked a little bit about voice before, with people like Future Earth and Atmos. We've already used those as examples. Even in their fluff posts that are just like either a meme or like a news article or something, in the caption, you can still almost always guess who it is posting if they have that recognizable voice before you even read who is actually posting it. And that is the sign of somebody who's doing a really, really good job on their social media management.
Great brand identity. That's the dream, right? Because when you scroll and you see something and you know it's going to be Nike because, of either their logo or the way their images are edited. Like, brilliant marketing right there.
One more question I would like to touch on. We haven't really talked about captions that much, but do you have any like tips or tricks about information to include either in your real posts or your fluff posts? Like, we're talking about voice. How does that kind of change depending on the content that you're putting out?
Yeah. The big trick here is it doesn't change, because you want to be the same person through and through no matter what you're posting. So if it's funny, if you're an educational voice and you're like, these are some fun facts about, nudibranchs, and you post those, you want that same kind of fun fact. Here's 3 ways you can engage yourself and have that same kind of listicle feeling. And if you're funny, stay funny. Don't change yourself because of a campaign or an advocacy event. That's confusing to your audience. They're not sure who is posting this now. And like, it kind of feels more like an ad when, you're watching, let's say, the Super Bowl, and then all of a sudden an ad comes on. You're like, oh, wait, what? Like, it's not what you're, I guess in this chance you might be expecting it, but it's just a little jarring for the user. And I think they follow you because they like what you do and they like your consistency. So don't change it up that much. Stick to your brand and just tweak it accordingly to what your intentions are. So keep it fun, keep it light the whole way. And I mean, that feels kind of like a trick question, right? But don't change. Don't change for the sake of your content. And then people will get used to it and share your content more because they know what's going to come.
Yes, I love that. I think that's such a great way to wrap up. We are at the top of the hour now. So if anybody has any final questions, let us know. Be sure to send me an email, youth@theoceanproject.org. Happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Kate, do you have any final notes? Anything to add?
No, I just do want to remind people that the world keeps spinning. Even when you're not on social media, and if you forget a day of posting, or if your advocacy campaign doesn't work the way you did it, don't worry. The world doesn't end. And that's something that I've been kind of living off of for the last year, because it's really easy to get stressed out that a post flopped, but just take a step back and realize that we're all trying to make the world a better place, a safer place, a more protected place, for wildlife and land and all of the above. So just have fun with it. Don't take yourself too seriously. And managers, let your staff experiment. That's my final conclusion statement.
Yes, I love that. Just final reminder for you guys before we let you go, I'm sending it in the chat here. If you could do us a favor and take 2 minutes to fill out our session feedback form for session 3, we would super appreciate it. If nobody has any more questions, Kate, thank you so much for such an excellent session.
Of course.
I'm
Fun.
so excited. I can't believe we're almost done with advocacy training. Next week, session 4 on Saturday, I'm going to be talking about event planning, which is kind of the next step after social media campaigns anyway. Talking about
I'll be there.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Thank you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you guys. It's been so fun having you.
Bye.